Just setting up now. All right, we're live. So Noah, last time we spoke, we came to the ILE or ENTP as the provisional typing. Have you had any further thoughts since then?
Yeah, especially I've been thinking about different like observations I have, like connecting, like I would say it's like behaviors and
Yep.
how it connects to like the functions, like in relation to the functions. I'm trying to like understand myself in connection to the type, and
Okay.
so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, and like
Sure.
some of the go through the functions a bit maybe.
Yep. We're more than happy to do that. So yeah, basically, I'm just at your disposal for the next hour. So any questions you have, happy to answer them.
Okay, so let's see. So if we could just maybe start by like going through the functions a bit maybe so I can
Yeah.
get a and then I can maybe relate to like how it fits and
Okay.
everything with it. Yeah.
Okay. So the ENTP starts with extroverted intuition. When I say starts, what I mean by that, I mean that is the main lens for which they see the world around them. So it is an area of strength, it's an area of value, but also a great amount of stubbornness in that it is the commanding lens. So this is the type that predominantly sees possibilities, sees ideas, opportunities, and is strongly disposed towards broadening the scope of possibility. They do things because it might be possible. And they are very much inclined towards doing things that increase what can be possible, doing things which can then lead to greater openings up of possibility. The implicit idea here is that the more that they open up possibilities, the more they can include all aspects of the world together. Because then everything, then a sort of positive yes is said to every aspect of the world. And what they then seek to do in order to actually embrace these different possibilities is to logically understand them. So the introverted logic is the creative function. It supports the extroverted intuition. So to really draw the different possibilities together, although they've opened the door and allow these things in, they then have to be made to cohere in some way. And that's where various provisional explanations, formulations, theories, ideas are offered by the NTP to make sense of these different possibilities that come in. They want the explanations to account for all the different possibilities. So there is that kind of coherence of understanding, a coherence that is not limited, but is unlimited in being able to account for all the different possibilities, and remains therefore open to understanding more elements as they come in, but in doing so, providing a totality of understanding. The key aspect here is that it's more about the unity, more about the bringing of all things together than it is endlessly changing, but that the full totality is understood and no parts are left out or excluded, which is a key thing. The EDP does not like any kind of exclusion. The so that's the main aspect. It's very sort of an intellectual universalization drive, which is their ego block, because the intuition and logic are valued in terms of extroverted intuition and introverted logic, so structures, rules, systems, um, and that this is intuition and logic are areas of strength. Now, because they value those aspects, they don't value extroverted logic and introverted intuition. These are still nevertheless strong areas for them. So what you'll find is that the extroverted logic becomes a sort of other strength, a very sort of flexible area, but not valued for its own sake, that supports the introverted thinking. So there's a constant supply of new facts, new information, getting across new practicalities, how to understand these, how to apply these, how to improve upon these, which the NTP is always factoring in. Their structural reasoning is always offset by an awareness of the practicalities and what is needed to actually make things workable, as well as logically coherent. but they much prefer it when things do click together and make sense. But they are also constantly scanning to make sure that things are also workable because they know that is needed, even though it isn't what necessarily gives them the same amount of enjoyment. So it's definitely an area of strength. They take that for granted, their ability to be competent to get across new bodies of information relatively quickly and learn and apply them in new situations. They don't have any sort of doubts of their ability to handle that. And if they've shown to not get something right, they don't have a sort of ego knock as a result of that because they know they just need to get across the information better and they'll know exactly what they need to do next time round. So they're very comfortable in that space. They have a very much a freedom to fail there because it's a very resilient area. The introverted intuition, because it's far more stubborn, because both intuitions end up being stubborn, that ends up more suppressed. So rather than being a constant background source, the introverted intuition becomes an almost a reluctance to narrow down possibilities, a reluctance to rule things out entirely. And so this is a type that, even though they know where things are likely to go, they don't pay that much heed. The need to keep the ideas open and possible takes far greater precedence. So they'll still press the button, knowing it might lead to bad outcomes. They'll still think, well, it could lead to a positive outcome, so I'm still going to do it. And they can't really be dissuaded from that. They're very stubborn in defending their desire to press that button because of the possibilities that are enclosed within. So the introverted intuition, when it is used, it's minimalistically used. When it is used, it's purely to serve the extroverted intuition. So there are situations where they might have lots of possibilities and which ones to pursue first, which ones to really go after. Well, it's going to be the ones which they feel are the most pregnant with new further possibilities, the ones that open up into more things. So their introvert intuition allows them to see the trajectories of possibilities in order to apply some amount of discrimination where necessary to maximize what possibilities there are under constraints of time and space, which is why they don't end up just pursuing lots and lots of trivialities. They find the biggest possibilities to prioritize. But that doesn't mean they want to close up any of the other possibilities. They don't like ruling them out. But I want to focus on these ones first. These ones are going to lead to the biggest, most interesting outcomes. And these ones, if we were to focus on these, would actually mean the sacrifice of bigger possibilities, which is not what I want. Um, so that's kind of the ego block and the id block, the strongest areas. Now we can go into where the ENTP feels that they can grow and develop, what their desires are. Now, because they're extrovert intuition leading, they have as their ability to focus on what's not the opposite of that, but the most distant from that is their introverted sensation. The ability to focus on maintaining the day-to-day details, keeping things in harmony, keeping things in a degree of balance and stability. They're not good at keeping their attention on that. Sustain their attention on that is quite draining because they use like quite a lot of cognitive load. But they also very much appreciate it when that's provided for them. They don't see it as their responsibility to maintain, but nonetheless they look to that and almost expect that from their environment. And when it is not provided, they can put up with it to some degree, but eventually it starts to have its drain on their mental and emotional health because suddenly think their environment becomes very inconvenient to occupy, and it suddenly becomes far less easy and often sometimes even becomes quite hostile. And yeah, the ENTP can rise to that sort of challenge temporarily, but it will have a deleterious effect. What they really look to from others is someone who can bring that calm and stability, who can maintain a nice, pleasant space to occupy. And they're very susceptible to people who are able to do this to the point where they can be very manipulatable in terms of present day physical circumstances being optimized by someone. Usually they like the idea of some kind of physical company. They like the idea of certainly one that's sort of not pressured, but more sort of welcoming and pleasant. Those are sorts of things that are very, very important to them. They just don't easily articulate that themselves or draw any red lines around that themselves. But when it's provided, they are deeply appreciative. The other part is less passive, and that's the extroverted ethics. What you'll find for an ENTP is that they will grow into their extroverted ethics when they have an increasing confidence. So, what you'll find is an interesting relationship between the extroverted ethics as their mobilizing function and the extroverted logic as their demonstrative function. So, when they're less confident in themselves, they rely more on the extroverted logic. They'll lean more into their expertise, into the facts, into how things work, into their knowledge of how things work, essentially, and how to then improve these and make these work practically in the real world. As they grow in confidence, they start to reach out into the social aspect, how to provoke emotional reactions in other people, with the intent towards creating positive emotional reactions. The ENTP very much likes positivity, not negativity. So they'll start trying to engage in experimentation with humor, with certain remarks that are said, where potentially quite controversial things are said quite lightly, or that they'll just experiment with what leads to different reactions in people with a desire for a positive response rather than a negative response. As they do that, they lack an awareness of the nuances in this area. And so at some point leads to failure. When it leads to failure, the confidence in that social atmosphere evaporates, and the ENTP falls back into the extroverted logic, into how things work, how things function. And that again is safer territory until they once again increase in their confidence and try again, and they can usually last longer the next time. And so it's almost like a spiral of progress rather than simply up and down. Um, so yeah, extroverted ethics leads is also where an ENTP again feels a certain amount of responsibility to do this thing. They just can't sustain that responsibility. So they kind of see their, even though they are very strong in the intellectual sphere, they really see their role as a sort of public intellectual, where they're able to bring new ideas and perspectives to cause people to react positively. And so doing both those things at the same time is what gives them that sense of fulfillment and growth. Whereas they can habitually then very easily lean back on their understanding of how things work to support that. And in the meantime, they're constantly framing, reframing, structuring their understanding of different ideas to make sense of them. But the key things are like utilizing their explanatory powers in order to create an effect with people around them. And in doing so, thereby opening up new possibilities as more people are interested in the ideas, and therefore things start to then be explored more. So it's all very sort of, they're always leaning towards a sort of positive cycles. The Now, I said the introvert intuition is suppressed. We also get to their blind spot, which is introverted ethics. Um, this is this is the inverse of their extroverted ethics. So, in the same way that their introverted intuition is suppressed, so is introverted ethics, but it's also weak. So it can't be actually called upon when in those rare occasions where it is needed. So it functions essentially as a blind spot. The ENTP will engage with people, will seek a more sort of public effect on people, yet not properly consider their relationships and the levels of closeness to each individual, and will often even suppress their own attitudes towards others, not particularly knowing whom they even dislike and why they dislike a person. And if they think they might dislike a person, that might fade very quickly as soon as some sort of reason for it to not to be one of dislike. If they find themselves disliking someone, it has to be justified according to some sort of rule or standard. Because what you see is a sort of defaulting effect. Whenever any question is asked of an ENTP to target their vulnerable function, the introverted ethics, it gets defaulted back up to the introverted logic. When they're challenged on their introverted ethics, they'll start to rationalize why any sort of character flaw in terms of, well, this is within the structures and the rules, and so it's perfectly okay. And so they just go towards rules and structures whenever that happens, because in the same way, they also struggle to very much say no to anything because they need some sort of rule or standard to say no rather than to say no purely because they dislike a certain thing. They almost cannot accept that they do dislike anything, even though they do because they're human. So it's a very sort of strange and very awkward part of them that aren't really in very good touch with. Now, that does lead to a certain amount of instability in relationships typically. And it does mean that their attempts to manage the emotions of others can fall short because they skirt over deep personal sensitivities that are relationally contextual rather than in terms of their public interactions with everyone as just a general audience. And that's where it can often blow up, which then can have reputational damage, which is why they then fall back on their extroverted logic again. So I call that the hubris dynamic, where they're engaging in their extroverted ethics without any support from the introverted ethics, thereby leading to the blow up and then the shift downwards back again into the demonstrator function. The other aspect here, in this sort of superego block, what's sort of expected of us, is the extroverted sensation, the role function. While the introverted ethics is stubborn, and so it is not responsive to demands from the external world, extroverted sensation is flexible. In the same way, the introverted sensation is actually very passive and receptive. Extroverted sensation is a function that is monitoring the external environment, and from that deriving what it needs to be doing because of what is socially expected of it, of what is practically expected of it. So the ENTP will engage with certain threats, certain advantages, certain pressures that they then need to respond to. And in doing so, that means that they will find themselves engaging in far more pressured environments than they actually would want to. They find themselves having to actually be more assertive than they like to. Sometimes they have to take charge and even shut down the conversation where they really do not want to do that. And so what we end up seeing is that the ENTP is ends up running at a higher level of pressure, a high level of urgency, a high level of intensity than they would like when there's a pressure on them to do so. What they really need is for someone to almost free them from that by creating a more balanced, more stable space. Hence, the introverted sensation being the way that they're freed from that struggle of having to work overly hard in that sort of rat race. They don't want to have to do that because that sort of scarcity environment deprives them of what they really want, which is an abundance environment where they can then entertain all the different possibilities. You can't entertain all the different possibilities if your livelihood is at stake. You have to do the immediate things, and that is a problem for them. So to actually have a stable and well-maintained atmosphere frees them from that sort of rat race and that sort of materialistic push or striving or direct competition, which they don't particularly like. When they do engage with it, though, it's not an area of strength. It is a weaker area that's had to learn and adapt based on necessity. So when they do engage with that, it's usually relatively short term, and it is ill applied to unfamiliar situations where certain kinds of power dynamics, certain kinds of confrontations are not well grounded in experience. That's when they can fall flat. If it is grounded in experience, then it can do relatively well and it can appear like it's a strong area, even though it's not. So those are all the different, those are the main sort of ways in which the ENTP is the way that it is. I should also say that in those rare occasions when the ENTP is in their introverted intuition, when they're sort of focused on one particular trajectory, which is very, very rare, but usually it's because they need to do that to then unlock more possibilities. That's also the one time when they're least receptive towards introverted sensation. And so they're usually in a sort of almost sort of a trance-like state where they're not eating, they're not doing anything, and they sort of need someone to almost force them out of that to some degree. But it's difficult for them to be forced out of that in that state. Once that fades, because it's usually very temporary, there's not much energy for it, then they can be more receptive towards the help of introverted sensation. Yeah, that's pretty much the type. Is that all making sense?
Yes, yes. Um, so I was also thinking in regards to like both the ethics functions.
Mm,
When I just got home from the US after like almost a year,
mhm.
and what I've noticed is I'm like far more outgoing and expressive than I was ever before, and like it stands out so much here in Sweden because of like the reserved culture. And so, and one thing I also noticed then is that I have a very like I think I can probably come across like too strong very early, because I feel like I can like I have a poor feeling of what's too personal to other people. Like
Yes.
what can I ask? What can't I ask? And also people might be shocked from like what I'm saying because I'm saying stuff that sounds like that should be personal to me, like to them. It sounds personal. But to me I don't feel like it's personal.
the ENTP does not really understand what is personal versus impersonal. They struggle to make those sorts of differences, and they don't really identify them in themselves. Um, Now, what the ENTP doesn't appreciate is when them doing that leads to people then being uncomfortable. And they don't like the idea of actually making people uncomfortable in their space because that then disrupts the calm and stability in the environment, which is where the ENTP feels the pain. They don't feel the pain in the introverted ethics, they feel the pain in the disruption to the introverted sensation as a result of them stumbling over that particular relational barrier. Um, and yeah, they tend to make people uncomfortable unintentionally because both the introverted ethic and the introverted sensation are very, very weak.
Yeah, I mean, especially like it's just that specific thing, like coming, and especially because like I've been talking to people online as well, where it's you can't really see how they're reacting to things, and so it's much harder to gauge if I'm like if it is actually too personal or if it's not, and especially when I don't like feel that myself, for example.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. Then also I was thinking with intuition, for example, today I was thinking about I was just like talking out loud with my brother, for example, about what it would be like if I were to live a life like basically as a nomad, where I were to live in like a country for like 2 years, immerse myself, and then like go somewhere else.
Yep.
And then he immediately goes, "Okay, but that would be really difficult." And instead of like because I can't just drop it, I have to like take it a step further. Then so instead of like dropping it, I went, okay, but what if I documented everything and I put it on YouTube as well? Like that way, maybe I could get some money from that. Maybe it could like work even better. And so, and I noticed even as well when I was younger, I've always been like when I want to try something, I'm like I have to do it. Like I'm not going to. I've been like I would pester my parents with like, oh, I want to try this, and if they would deny me, I would get like very upset by that.
Yes. Yes. There is I think one of the best sort of literary characters showing this tendency is Toad of Toad Hall. I'm not sure you've ever seen The Wind of the Willows.
And
Wind of the Willows. There's lots of anthropomorphized English wildlife animals, and there's a toad who is basically based off an aristocrat who has this big mansion, and he's squandering all his family fortunes because he keeps on pursuing new fads. Whether that, oh, he really wants to ride a horse and cart. Then suddenly he discovers that there's such a thing as an automobile because it's set in like the 1920s. Oh, he really wants to then drive a automobile, and he ends up being arrested because he gets caught up in some sort of difficulty. And I think at the end he's seen, he found sort of Wright brothers level aeroplane. He starts trying to fly that instead. So he's constantly engaging in new fads. He gets obsessed with them. He won't be dissuaded from pursuing this new fad because it's fascinating.
yeah, and also uh, one thing, especially with that I think drives my especially my parents and like people who live with me crazy is that I don't know if this is how like SI would work, but like for ILE, but I really like don't it doesn't bother me if there's things everywhere. Like because I came home a week ago, my mom said you can't live out of a suitcase because like I
Yep.
haven't got the clothes out of the suitcase and I'm like using it as a wardrobe instead
Yes.
of like putting it in a drawer
Yep.
because like I mean I guess it would be nice if they were in the drawer, but that takes effort
Yes.
and
You have
the
to prioritize
function.
that over everything else.
Yes, I would rather like go be on my phone and watch something than do that.
Yes. The ENTP almost needs to be told to do that sort of thing. It's not that they are against doing that thing, not at all. It's that it is not something that takes up their focus compared to ideas, possibilities, anything not in their present environment. But at the same time, they are very flexible in terms of the physical tangibles. So someone tells them, okay, this needs to be done, and there is that sort of expectation in that moment they will do it. They will complete the task, and it'll be absolutely fine. But unless there's someone to tell them, they just won't do it. It's not that they will refuse to do it if someone asks them, because they are flexible in this area.
And that's very true also because I saw that when I was an au pair, I could do the like tasks very well with like cleaning stuff, folding laundry, and all that.
Yes,
But as soon as it comes to myself, when I'm not working, I just don't do it.
yes. There is no self-driven motive element um in the area of sensation. I don't cook for myself. I cook for other people. If I've set a challenge of I'm going to cook this for everyone coming over, I will cook it. But if it's just me on my own, I'm the most lazy person possible.
Yeah, and like also uh probably like in the hierarchy of things I would do if I like have I'm on my own like right now I have all the time in the world. I would have to be like locked in to an empty room with clothes on the floor and a drawer where I can do nothing else, and then I
Yes.
would do it to occupy my time.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's like so many other things I could do. I could go outside or like do literally anything except for
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. The motive energy is really behind the intuition
Yeah.
and the ethics, I should say.
Another thing also I was thinking about, especially I believe that my stepmom is an LSI, and we've had I've had always a like very hard time getting along with her,
Mm.
both because to me like people who are very rigid like about how things are supposed like when someone says this is how it's supposed to be, my immediate reaction is just why.
Hmm.
And I don't know, like also being around a person who's like stressed about how things are supposed to be, like I don't know, she might actually not be an LSI, but at least like she's a rigid person, like fairly rigid and very like particular about how like let's say this jacket goes on this like hook when you get
Yes.
inside. Like to me, I don't pay attention to it, so I'm just gonna like fail at doing that thing every time because I'm not gonna remember to put my jacket there.
Yep. It if things look arbitrary, then the ENTP is definitely going to start to inquire into why that might be the case. They want to understand the reason. They want to understand how it fits together. They're not going to accept it as being simply an imposition based on will. It needs to connect to some sort of deeper reason.
Yeah. And also another thing, especially since I got home here,
Hmm.
is seeing all the people. I was thinking about this, and I haven't thought about this before. Is with like trends, like people
Yeah.
who dress all the same. Like let's say everyone has the same kind of haircut, they have the same clothes, and they like all walk together looking like that. That to me is like that throws me off a lot because I don't know. It's something about when everyone looks the same. It's just like what are we even like
Hmm.
doing kind of thing.
Well, the ENTP doesn't want things to all be the same, because if everything's all the same, to an ENTP, that means there are other ways of doing things that have been excluded. What the ENTP wants to do is to bring in the things that have been excluded and make them also part of the whole. So they will find the alternatives. They'll be actively driven to seek out an alternative way of thinking of it so that that can then be brought back into the whole. So if everyone dresses one way, they'll dress another way. And not only will they then dress another way, it's not just, oh, I just want to do things differently. No, I want to do things differently and then have my way of doing things differently be accepted as part of the whole. That's the key thing which is often missed when thinking about ENTPs. And it's different to them for an ENFP, which they're not looking for things to maybe brought back into the whole. They'll be, I'll do things differently because I think that could actually that is the better reflection of practical reality, and that will make things work better. But the ENTP is actually looking for that to then become accepted as part of the whole.
Yeah, I would say I don't have enough desire to like fit in to those trends to actually go out and like follow it. So because to
Mm.
me it seems arbitrary in a sense
Hmm.
to like do that. So I end up like I'm not trying necessarily to like stick out for the sake of sticking out, but I'm just doing my thing. And then as you said also I really relate to like wanting to still like be accepted without going through with the other things.
Yes, the social conformity in and of itself to an ENTP means I've excluded other ways of being. That's the key. That's the key tension. And the ENTP is what we call I call it an antithetic type. That means that their strengths are not naturally aligned to their values. Their values are about everything being part of a whole and everything being together. And that sense of togetherness naturally aligns to sensation and ethics, which are far more entangled up with their experiences and people and all the rest. Whereas intuition and logic operate in terms of a distance from the thing that's being considered. They are thought about rather than felt. So the ENTP always feels that their values and their strengths are sort of, there's a gap between them. And for them, the bridge is basically their path of development in life. Their bridge is, on the one hand, wanting to feel part of things, wanting aspects, including themselves, to be accepted, but at the same time wanting to pull in the other direction than what everyone else is doing, so that that other direction can then be brought into the fold, as opposed to giving up on that alternate direction and just conforming. Whereas you look at the SEIs, they are far more inclined to just conform.
Yeah,
And also the key thing, and in doing so, the ENTP provides a social service, the social service of preventing the conformity from becoming stagnant. They bring in the extra part which makes the conformity sustainable.
yeah, and I'm almost entirely sure my younger brother is a CEI, and I talked to him about this as well, and it's almost like he said, like, what do you mean? Like, what am I just conforming? Like, it's just the thing that you do, kind of
Yep, yep,
like this is just what everyone does, so this is what we do.
yep,
And I don't know, it's something, yeah, just that it's that automatic for me is like, how can it even be this way?
yes,
How can you not think about that you actually are doing it?
yes. This is also why duality is not just that instantaneous click. It's something which both types sort of grow towards. In fact, the ENTP has to come to terms with the fact that they ultimately do want to be accepted. They aren't just seeking to be that maverick off in the corner away from everyone else. They don't actually have that fierce independent streak. That's not actually what they're doing. They can confuse themselves because of their need to go off in another direction for being someone who's all about independence, when actually that's not what their journey is. Once they accept the journey is to be accepted just on new terms, novel terms, alternative terms. Once they accept that sort of complexity, then they can start to grow in the right direction for them that makes them happy. At the same time, you get the SEI as a thetic type, not an antithetic type. And their growth is realizing that they do need something from outside of their conformity for their conformity to be sustainable. Because otherwise it just becomes, yeah, lemming behavior.
Yeah, and one thing that it's almost like you you find where the box is, like this is where people are, this is what's
Yep.
accepted, these are the norms, and then how far can I stray from it,
Yes.
and by being the way I want to be while still being accepted.
Yes.
And I can also see that very clearly, like in myself.
Yes. What helps the ENTP is the evolution of is really their evolution of their philosophy. As their philosophy, as their understanding of the world, starts to evolve and develop, they do start to realize, okay, why is it? Why is it that certain possibilities must be removed from the whole? Like, burning babies. Why must burning babies be removed from the whole? Well, their moral philosophy develops to the point where actually, yes, no, I know we can't do this. There is something which needs to be upheld, which involves removing that as a possibility from acceptable behavior. And yeah, as their philosophy develops, they're able to explain these exceptions to the totality more and more effectively. And in doing so, they're then able to make suggestions which are then socially palatable.
Yeah, and I guess also personally, it becomes a very like experiential approach in the sense that, like, let's say socially,
Mm,
for example, with myself, I can see that I may sometimes like be too like a little too intense, and
yes.
then someone reacts, and then I know now, like, okay, I cannot maybe act this way with everyone,
Yep.
and then slowly but surely, maybe the like with experience, you get like a framework for how to interact, and also maybe like a better feel for who uh, who will accept what kind of thing.
Well, that is also why socioeconomics is very powerful for an ENTP because it provides a philosophical understanding for how people vary and how equally each of these different ways of being are equally valid, just different.
Yeah,
And so you start learning how to navigate the socio as opposed to um, as opposed to just compromising what you are about because someone else is for some reason so very contrarian to how you want to be.
and then also kind of learning that this took time for me as well, and a pretty recent thing where I had to accept that you can't be liked by everyone. Like, to some extent, you also can't compromise entirely.
Mm,
Like, to some extent, you have to be okay with the fact that some people are not gonna like you, and that maybe that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong.
yes. Once the come to accept that some people disliking you is all part of the way of things and all part of that totality, they come to accept that. Initially, they think, well, if there's a possible way of me getting that person to also like me, I'm going to try to make that possibility happen. But that then can become futile to some degree.
And also, I mean, in my eyes, it is, and still sometimes, but definitely more before, it was like every. I don't see why I can't get along with everyone. Like, I don't see. I don't have like preferences. Like, I don't like this, as you said also with like introverted ethics. Like, I don't like these kind of people, and I do like these kind of people. But like, no, I everyone's just people. So like,
Yes.
so in I guess I it's kind of like a discernment thing then maybe. Like, um I don't see why I like should I get along with these people but not these people. And
Yes.
so there has to be some middle ground where I can get along with everyone, even though maybe that's not probably not like that's not realistic.
Yeah. There is eventually a middle ground where you try to get on with everyone, and as a result, you actually stand for nothing.
Yeah.
And then your own framework then is totally incoherent. And the ENTP understands those tensions better than, say, an ESE or even an EIE.
Okay. And why wait, why exactly is that compared
Well,
to those types?
because if you become anything for everyone, then you eventually start contradicting yourself.
Yeah.
And then what makes sense in one situation is now totally reversed when talking to another person. So you then don't really stand for anything. It's often the ENTP wants to stand for something, and it sounds very limiting, but they do want to have some sort of framing for how it all makes sense. And you can't have a frame for how it all makes sense if you're literally contradicting yourself, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah. No, it's like I feel like I would probably not be someone who stands very hard by like certain ideologies, for example.
Yes.
Like, I would rather consider many things, and like try to find, like, things might change as well. But it's more so when I think about like standing up, it's more. especially when it comes to myself. Like,
Yes.
uh, I have my way of being, and I'm going to stand up for who I am, and
Hmm.
like I shouldn't compromise too much on that. Like,
Yes.
not be like obnoxious about it, like the same way, exact same way with exactly everyone.
Yes.
Like, you obviously have to adapt a little bit, but still, that's an area where I would definitely like to stay true to myself, and also
Yes.
I think somewhere where it might be more difficult, or at least I've felt it can be difficult there to stand, like, keep to that, but something to like work towards. Yeah.
Yes, because the area of stubbornness is not the logic, it's the ethics. The ENTP is a contrarian type, not an obstinate type. So what that means is that they don't want to compromise on how they express themselves. In the same, they don't want to compromise on what is possible.
Yeah.
And that also answers the question which has been asked. Now I'm checking questions. How do an IE differ in this respect regarding standing out? The ENTP, because they are contrarian types, they are looking, they see their pursuit of alternatives as standing out in terms of how to express themselves and in terms of how that is then socially received. And what they do is they then measure the effect of their standing out by also how effective this has been. Whereas the ENFP does it in reverse. They seek alternatives, but in seeking those alternatives, they aren't looking to stand out in terms of how things appear to others. They are looking to make things more effective, which they then measure in terms of how it is then perceived.
Okay.
Because their demonstrated function is the extroverted ethics and their mobilizing function is the extroverted logic. So they're not stubborn in the ethics. ENFPs, even though they're very much free spirits, they are actually very socially adaptive. They don't do anything that is very sort of attention-seekingly odd. They can just sort of they can just find different ways of doing things and be quite particular on those things being more effective and and in doing so breaking with certain rules or structures which are believed to cohere and make sense. They can basically do nonsensical things um, rather than socially rather than socially off-putting things and but in doing those nonsensical things, they're inclined to thereby show some level of competence in making things work better despite the nonsense. But in doing that, they then measure the success of it by how people then responded to it, because that's what they fall back on as their demonstrated function. So it is in reverse for an ENFP. I'd also say that they don't have the desire to then make everything then be brought back into that totality or be commonly accepted. They are at the end of the day looking for growth and development of themselves. So for them, it's about, okay, does it work for me? And that's what they're really looking for. What they'll do is they'll read how people are reacting to them as a sort of indirect measure of whether this thing has actually worked for them in terms of being more effective in their development and growth and mastery of the various shades and nuances of life.
Yeah. uh yeah, I would say I've always been prone to like saying nonsense stuff socially, just for the sake of like the reaction,
Yes.
just to, because it's like it's a fun thing. So I just like,
Yes.
for example, I was talking about like career
Mhm.
with some people, and then I just said like, why don't I become a exorcist in the like a Catholic church, like, and devote my life to that. Like, I have no plans of doing that, but like I thought it was funny to say.
Yes. An ENTP may very well declare suggestions because they know it will provoke a reaction, rather even though they know it won't work. They'll deliberately say something they know won't work because they'll enjoy the reaction. Implicit in that is their ability to know what works and what does not work. Of course, they know it won't work. They'll still suggest it because they like the reaction, which you won't get with an ENFP because they take the what works very seriously and they don't take the need to create some sort of reaction in others very seriously.
All right, like in the same spirit, I also had a habit of saying like deliberately false things. Like I knew was like absurdly wrong, or like not like just logically false,
Yes.
and just see how people react to that. Like,
Yes.
what will they say? What will they? How will they take this?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Um, yeah, and I was thinking as well. With because I'm assuming this is probably a like TE with like not being valued in the id
Mhm.
block, is that I would often, especially when I was younger, I would not really care about how sort of how realistic something was, or like how like pragmatism over the fact that I just wanted to do something or try something.
Yes. Again, that area is taken for granted. So you will use and abuse the practicalities and how things work. You'll know what works and what doesn't very effectively. You'll be very confident ability to assess that, but you won't take those conclusions very seriously in terms of what decisions you then make.
And I think also the problem was that I had so little like experience of doing things,
Yep.
so that, but I was almost like delusionally confident in my ability to make things work,
Yep.
so that to others I sounded like a moron, because like you're not gonna be able to do that is what they thought. But I was like I thought I could see like I could do this,
Yes.
and I can imagine myself like succeeding.
Yes.
So I don't see the problem, and then I just appear incredibly stubborn about how it's gonna happen.
Exactly. It's the it comes with a huge amount of stubbornness on what can possibly happen.
Yeah. Yeah, for example, I was like at 10 years old or something. I wanted to start playing ice hockey, and I
Yeah.
barely knew how to like ice skate. And
Yes.
at that age, like people, they're already good, and it's like far too late to start. But I was like, yeah, yeah, okay, I know how to. I can definitely do this, and I was like confident in my ability to learn it and become
Yep.
good at it, even though I had very little experience of doing it, of like how
Yep.
hard it would actually be.
Makes sense. Can you hear me? Okay. Hello? Can you
Hello?
hear me?
Yeah.
All good? Okay, good.
And also, um, uh, in extroverted sensation, uh, definitely, I think across the board, I think this is something I also kind of misunderstood about the type
Yep.
before, that I thought it was like that ENTP would kind of be assertive, but in a way also, or maybe that is the case, I don't know, but I don't like asserting myself very much. Like I don't like having to say this is what I want. This is like having to tell other people that. I would rather just be in situations where I can choose myself, and I don't have to talk, like I don't have to go like put my will over people.
Yes. That's quite right because the difficulty for the NTP is that if they are doing that, they are then snuffing out possibilities. Extroverted sensing and extrovert intuition are direct opposites. The more that you fill space, the more that you fill space with you fill reality with actuality, the more you diminish potentiality.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not that I also I definitely can do that, but in the long run, if I were to do that over and over and over and over to people, I would start kind of feeling like an asshole,
Yes.
like I'm bothering people way too much or something. If I was constantly uh, having to like put my will over others.
Mm, yes. It feels very dirty to an ENTP to do that. Sometimes they have to do it, and they will then have to do it, but they really do not want to do that. Now, if they do it, it won't be driven by any sort of personal attitude. It can't. But what they can do is they can do it in terms of structures and rules. They can enforce the rules if need be. That's when extrovertation is used more effectively.
So I'm curious then. Let's say an ENTP is in a situation where their possibility of doing things or like exploring things is massively restricted,
Yes.
but they don't have like an obvious rule to point to then to like get out of that situation. Would that then like be easy or still like hard for them to assert themselves out of if we assume that they have to like go against people to get out of it and it would negatively impact the other people?
So you're saying that the possibilities are being reduced, and so they need to apply some sort of willpower to get out of that in order to increase their possibilities.
Yes.
Oh yeah, no, no, that will follow.
Okay.
The reason why the role function is done at all is because it serves a leading function.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
you you would not take any sort of willful action unless it is to broaden possibilities. If there's any sort of external threat, why is a threat a threat? To an ENTP, a threat is a threat because that snuffs out possibilities.
That makes sense. Also, I think basically boredom is my greatest enemy. Like being in a situation where I have to do the same thing over and over, and I don't find any more fun or meaning in it,
Mm,
and I can't get out of it. That's basically like the nightmare situation, kind of.
mm. I think usually ENTPs increase their ability to find something interesting in a smaller number of things over time because they acquire more lenses through which to perceive things and appreciate things. But yeah, if there is no other way of doing something, it's literally the same task again, again, and again, then that can run dry.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's basically all the things I had to take up.
All right. Are there any questions for Noah in the last few minutes remaining? Anyone have any questions for Noah? Please feel free to type them. Let's give him a little bit of time just to see what people say. Then we can probably wrap up.
All right.
Hmm.
Mm, mm, mm.
I mean, nothing's come through yet. Oh, here we go. I just tuned in here at the end, so you might have covered it already. How's the experience with various other types? How's your experience with various other types?
Um, I would say I get along with most people.
Yeah.
Most other types. Maybe the most the most difficulty I have is people who are like rigid socially.
Mhm.
People who have like very set understanding of how things are supposed to be, like what you're supposed to say, how you're supposed to act.
Mhm.
Because I feel very restricted by that specifically.
Yes.
And so I think that's the one area where if that's the case, it can be very hard. But otherwise, it they can be almost like most any type of way, and I'll still be fine with them.
Yep.
We'll get along.
Yeah. And that you can see in those situations it's playing on both stubborn areas, both the intuition and on the ethics.
That makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Any more questions? Give maybe one more minute, then we can wrap up.
Okay.
We've got 8 people watching, which isn't bad. Actually, I think it might be seven because one of those people is me.
Mm.
All right. I think we can probably wrap up then.
All
Not
right.
getting anything yet. So Noah, thank you very much for tuning in, everyone, and thank you for coming on and doing the follow-up session.
Yeah. Thank you as well for having me here doing
All
this.
right. Well, take care. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me and we can sort that out.
But
Oh,
goodbye.
and also, I should say, sorry, I should also say, if you'd ever like to dive more into understanding socionics, please feel free to take the type mastery pathway. That's for everyone else watching. Definitely something to do if you want to broaden your understanding of all the types, how they, all the internal dynamics work, all the transitions, all the dichotomies that make them up. It can just take your understanding of the types to the next level. So that's for anyone watching and for you know if you're interested, there is that type mastery pathway and that the pricing of that has not been affected by my recent price increase. So it's still at the discounted rate that it was before. So yeah,